Welcome to the Body Smart Podcast, where we remove roadblocks to fitness and health to empower you to master your health habits. We help you become Body Smart.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Body Smart Vodcast. We're so excited to have you here today, and also excited to introduce to you Julie Hansen, who is a registered dietitian here in the area and is just an expert on intuitive eating. And so that's what we'd like to discuss today, about how to do intuitive eating. So tell us a little bit more about you and about kind of how you got started.
Okay. Well, first of all, we are not native to Utah. My husband and I moved here in 2004 from Fort Collins, Colorado. We work and teach at Weber State, and then I also have a private practice. And so part of my private practice is working with patients and teaching them intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is a program that was developed by Evelyn Tribbley and Elsie Reich, and here's the book. And this was published in the 1990s, and since then she has done several editions of that. She also has published a workbook that just came out last spring. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about these resources. And then, of course, there's also audiobooks that I think are really good for people to listen to as well.
Absolutely.
Because then, you can listen to that as you go along. But basically, intuitive eating is a program that it's a non-diet approach. I think right now people have become so obsessed with, what not to eat, and clean eating, and paleo, and keto, and by the time patients come to me, they are so confused about what to eat.
So many fad terms out there that are so hard to keep up with what it actually means and what the truth is behind nutrition, right?
Right. So, it's just even every year there's some new things coming out, and sometimes things get reinvented. So, and not only is that harmful for most adults, but also for kids. And so we're going to kind of talk about that as well. But intuitive eating is based on 10 principles. And so the principles range from rejecting the diet mentality, knowing what foods is satisfying to you, challenging the food police, and very importantly, respecting your hunger and fullness.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's
huge. It is huge.
People think, that's no big deal. But how many of you really know when eat based on hunger and fullness?
No. I struggle to do that all the time, right? It takes a lot of mindfulness.
Right.
But that's something we can develop, something that we can learn.
Yeah, it's like training for anything. You practice and you get better at it.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
Eating outside of non-hunger is probably the reason we have an obesity epidemic. So I think that, and then again, if you're eating bad food, you feel guilty, and you kind of get that all or nothing type of thing going. Well, I have one cookie, you might as well have 10. So we try to address that, to really stop that overeating. And you don't really have to avoid certain foods to feel better. You just have to eat less, and that does feel good. That is very energizing when you don't overeat.
Right.
So that's kind of what intuitive eating is. It sounds easy, but it's actually really quite... it's a process.
Right. Yeah, it's not necessarily hard principle by principle, but when you hear all of it at once, it's a little overwhelming to take on the whole thing, right?
Right.
And so is that part of your program then in working with people, is breaking that down and giving them, step-by-step solutions and options on how to incorporate that into their life?
Right. Part of the workbook, we start with an assessment that kind of takes us through, really what are the areas you need to work on. And the workbook, again, you can get this on Amazon, and there's an assessment part, and then basically from there you can kind of pick and choose what principles you want to work on. But I usually do have people start with rejecting the diet mentality.
Yeah, that's huge.
I have some people stuck there, like they've been dieting their whole life for whatever reason. I do also work with disordered eating and eating disorders, and we find, a lot of that is tied into that as well. So that's definitely one place we start.
Do you often have people come in your office and say the phrase, so this is something that I hear all the time, I've tried everything?
Yeah.
Right?
Like one of the tools in this workbook is they have to write down all their diets.
Oh, yeah.
And when they do, they start getting so mad because, we've all bought into the fact that a diet is what you have to do, but there's a 94% failure rate
Oh,
with
yeah.
diets. So
Yeah, and they look at all the money they've spent and all the time and emotional investment that they've put into all these different products or things.
Right.
Oh,
They're so mad by the
I'll
time they
bet.
get done with that. Yeah.
I'll
And
bet.
I mean, I've kind of forgotten some of the diets, and sometimes I go, oh yeah, I remember that diet.
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
forgot about that.
I remember battling that one too.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So a lot of people, it's a lifelong process. So the one thing about intuitive eating is it's not a quick fix, and you actually do kind of need to set aside weight loss goals for a while.
Sure,
Because
I
it's
can see
hard
that.
to, I don't want you to weigh yourself. I don't want you to constantly be judging what you're eating, because then you're turning intuitive eating into a diet.
Right,
So,
right.
so a lot of times you have to put the work in. You have to give this a process. It's when I teach it in a group setting, it's between 8 to 10 weeks.
Wow, okay.
So, and it takes work, but it's worth it, because you will never, ever have to go on a diet again.
Yeah.
Ever.
I totally believe that. It's interesting that it's about that 8 to 10 week time frame. So I call that the physiological change time. That somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks is about the same amount of time that it takes to make any adaptation in our body. So as I talk with patients as a physical therapist, all the time I say, well, this is going to take between 6 to 8 weeks. When I do the metabolic testing, same idea. Like every about 8 weeks or so, we're going to want to retest and see where you're at, because that's about the amount of time that it takes our body to change. But it would make sense that that's about the time it takes us to maybe mentally change and mentally kind of grasp a concept and make it permanent.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of things that help with intuitive eating are slowing down when you're eating.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because, so sometimes I'll recommend, people get out the typical chopsticks. That can be something that they can do, or eating with a non-dominant hand.
I love that.
Or else just watching somebody who's a really slow eater and kind of patting yourself after that, or just trying not to be the first one done.
Right.
In your family.
It's not a race.
Yeah. So that can help you kind of temper yourself with that. So to kind of gauge, well, gee, maybe I'll try to be, this person. So you'll probably notice that you do feel that fullness. Anything we can do to help with that is really good, to slow down in eating and to not be distracted while you're eating. So to avoid watching TV, because eating, it's not just your stomach, your brain talks to your stomach. And if your brain is engaged doing something else, it's not going to be available for eating. So, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Most of us aren't great at multitasking or dual tasking, especially on something that's so in the background.
Right.
Right. And so, it probably would be a very good tip to concentrate on the task at hand when we're eating, and to maybe view eating as not just something to do because we're hungry, but more as, a way to fuel our body so that we can be healthy.
Right.
Do you work with that a lot, changing that mentality behind why?
I don't know that I start with that necessarily, but it ends up that way. But we also want to be satisfied with what we eat as well. And that's one of the principles of intuitive eating is satisfaction. And that's the only reason it works.
Yeah.
Is because you're eventually satisfied with what you eat. So, I know I have chocolate every day, and I typically have ice cream at night, but you know what? We just don't eat a lot of it, and we kind of work it in. I think one of the other things that can help you with intuitive eating, these are peanuts, and this is actually a half a cup, which I think is kind of interesting because it doesn't look like a half a cup. So a quarter cup of nuts is a serving. Now, as a beginning intuitive eater, or what I call people baby intuitive eaters, you have to start slowly, and I think having things prepackaged is really helpful for you.
Absolutely.
So that you're not eating out of a large container, because you're just not ready for that. In fact, most people really aren't. So prepackaging things. I'll have people say, I only eat a few handfuls of nuts a day. Well, that's gonna be 300 to 400 calories, and
depends on the size of your handful, right?
So I want you to be mindful of that, and not being kind of the chaotic eating, I guess is what I call it. So I think that can really help set you up for intuitive eating. Yeah,
I would agree that chaotic is an interesting term. I like that a lot, because we talk a lot about mindfulness with eating, right? And ways that we can be more mindful of our eating patterns. But we do tend to kind of have a chaotic, just
Well,
whatever's in front of me type
yeah,
pattern, right?
yeah. And have you noticed, maybe with your patients, it kind of mimics your life.
Mhm.
You know, that when your life is kind of chaotic, and some people like that, but your eating will be as well.
Right.
And there's a lot of different types of chaotic eating. Like there's the, you know, where you can't, if there's food there, you're going to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of the waste not.
Mm-hmm.
The people
Yeah.
that
Oh,
don't like
yeah.
to waste the food,
Right.
right? The emotional.
Right.
So that, and one of the things about emotional, you know, a lot of us think about that as just stress, anxiety, but it's also boredom.
Yeah.
Boredom is an emotion. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so some people don't know how to do nothing, you know, so being still is really hard for people.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
So yeah,
interesting.
there's a different types of that.
Right. The
you know?
waste not. That's an interesting one. I have that
Yeah.
conversation with people all the time. Like, it will go to waste. It'll just go to your waste, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, talking through that mentality of, oh, I don't want it to go to waste.
Yeah.
Somebody was telling me about a piece of cake that they had in their fridge from like a birthday 2 months ago, and they're like, well, you know, I don't want to throw that out. I'm like, and why? Like, what value do you get out of that? Well, I don't want to waste it.
Yeah.
Like,
they probably learned that as a kid, though,
yeah,
don't you
oh,
think?
absolutely. And
Mhm.
some of these things are so ingrained in us, right? So for my personal food issues, I guess, I grew up in a family of all boys, and now I have all boys. And so some of those mentalities of like, you've got to be a big eater, and you've got to clear your plate, and you've got to get seconds and clear that plate. And, you know, some of those mentalities are just stuck in there of being a good boy is a big eater
Right.
type of a thing. And so that's hard for me to get out of there. And so I
Yeah.
have to trick myself sometimes into doing stuff. So some of my hacks are like eating off smaller plates or
Mhm.
things like that.
Right.
That do help me, if nothing else, fool myself into at least slowing down, taking smaller portions,
Yes.
and be more mindful of the decisions that I'm making instead of just my reaction to food.
Right.
So I try to stress that a lot with
Yeah.
people, like make concrete decisions about what you're going to eat instead of just react to whatever situation is around
Okay,
you.
so I say be proactive, not reactive.
Yeah. Oh,
So
perfect.
yeah,
Perfect.
So
I love it.
I also work with the athletes at Weber State, and that's one of the things I teach
Yeah.
them. So if it doesn't get into your grocery cart, it will not get into your mouth.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So be, you know, proactive with that, and that will filter down probably with a lot of areas of your life as well. That if you
Oh,
can
yeah.
be organized and planned,
Oh, absolutely.
it really does make life a lot easier.
Mhm.
So having backup plans, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like that organization and planning is one of the key factors that can
Mhm.
help people really be successful. That if they have a concrete plan, not only, you know, a day-to-day or a week-to-week plan, but just an overall plan of where am I going with my health and where am I going with my decisions about food.
Yeah.
I think it can help us continue to make progress through that process.
Right.
Just because we tend to get, you know, stuck on certain things, and if we don't have a long-term goal of like I'm doing this so that I can live a healthier lifestyle,
Right.
then we get stuck and
Yeah.
we get frustrated or we break down on certain things and stop moving forward.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about intuitive eating is that you really can immediately feel better.
Yeah.
You know, it is eating based on how you want to feel.
Mm.
And so that's huge. I
Mhm.
mean, you know, you can sit down to a plate of fettuccine Alfredo and still eat it intuitively because you're going to fill up a lot more. It's a high-fat meal,
Mhm.
so you're probably not going to finish it. But you still can walk out of the restaurant, or if you make it at home, you can still leave the table feeling okay.
Rather
you know,
than
'cause
like, oh my gosh, what did I just
know,
do?
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So it's a kind of big deal like that.
Right.
So, yeah.
So are you kind of a mentality that there's nothing really that's off the table as far as what you can and can't eat?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm kind of that way as well. I definitely have things that I would say, you know, maybe not the best choice because
Right.
the amount that you can eat of that really is so small that you're not going to be very
Yeah.
happy with that choice in the long term.
Right.
But-
But if it's satisfying,
Right.
some people may want to try it.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
mm.
Well, and so I think that's something that people develop over time is they refine that palate of what is
Yes.
satisfying.
Yes. Is it worth it?
Yeah, and that's a big thing. Is it worth it? And sometimes it may be.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a cascade of other choices then that you have to make because you made that one choice.
Right.
But
right.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer in that there's nothing that's off the table. It's just because I made that decision, what other decisions do I have to make?
Right.
It's like I equate it to going on vacation.
Yeah.
Like, should we go on vacation every once in a while? Absolutely. But we have to make sure it's within our budget, and that if we do go on vacation, there's a whole lot of other decisions that we have to make because we did.
Right. Yes,
And
exactly.
So yeah, for me, that's a way of helping people relate it. But I know you've got other tools and stuff that you use with the intuitive eating program and some of the stuff you work with. How do you normally help patients get on board with that long term?
Yeah. So the one thing is, they have all the equipment they need, which is their brain and their stomach. It's with them all the time. So it's just more practicing that and putting it into place.
Sure.
Sometimes it's a little hard to sell the program because people are so invested. They're coming to a dietitian, they want to lose weight. But again, they've tried other diets, that hasn't worked for them. And so this is a new approach. And most people, by the time I see them, have this really unhealthy relationship with food. I mean, they just have never thought about, eating when they're hungry, stopping when they're full. They don't even know. They aren't even aware of those body signals.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of structure in intuitive eating, but it's a different type of structure. It's not the structure of avoiding carbohydrates or counting, fat grams. It's not that.
Right.
It is structure that you have within your body. And all of us were made this way. The part of our brain that tells us when we're hungry and when we're full is the same part that tells us when we have to go to the bathroom. So I'm hoping it's still there for most of us. Right?
Yeah, it better be, or we're going to have some problems.
So it's there. We just have to actually trust that and use it. So yeah, it works for everybody.
Yeah, and that's finding those ways to key into those solutions that are already there. I find that same thing with physical therapy. It's like most of the exercises I send home with people are things that they can do with little or no equipment.
Right.
It's just about moving and doing.
Yeah.
And I think it's similar with our diet pattern, with our eating pattern in our life. It's not that we're reinventing the wheel, it's just being more mindful and doing what our body needs instead of kind of us forcing what we want to do on it.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and then there's just so many things with eating. Everybody is an expert, it seems like. And then the emotional piece. The one thing diets never address is emotional eating. And that's usually why the biggest problem, obviously, is they don't work, is because we're human beings and we aren't used to, we're used to having rules and we like those rules. But the problem is if you break a rule when you're dieting, then you become that all or nothing person where, I had one cookie, I might as well have 10. So we need to really think about that, not have those rules in the first place.
Right.
But if you truly give yourself permission to eat something, you will not overeat it.
Right. And that I love that mentality. So many people beat themselves up about every choice that they have to make, and they feel guilty that they even have to eat at some point. A lot of women that I've worked with, they feel guilty that they even have to eat, and it's like, wait, time out. That's not a healthy mentality to have about food, about eating.
About it, probably they feel that way about a lot of things.
Yeah,
I'm
they
sure.
probably do in life.
Yeah.
Every time they don't exercise, if they
or
don't
have free time,
or
read a book or
right,
something.
yeah, they probably feel guilty that they're not spending that time with their kids or what, and that kind of guilt mentality just isn't healthy.
No.
Instead, it's we've got to focus more on how does this help me be who I need to be to take more time with the kids that I love, or how does this help me be better for those that I love and the things that I want to invest my time in.
Right.
Investing in ourselves really does help us to be able to give more to the things that we care about, and nutrition is such a big part of that. If we're not fueling our body right, nothing else is going to work quite as well as it should.
Right. Evelyn Tribbley in this book talks about the guilt in eating, and she says, if you didn't steal the food, you don't need to feel guilty about eating it. So,
I love that.
Yeah, is that good?
Oh yeah, that's so good.
So yeah, you can feel guilty about other things, but don't feel guilty about what you ate. You made a choice, and you get to decide, again, how do you want to feel? So if you want to feel full, then go for it. If you don't, which, after a while you're not going to want to, you're going to feel probably a lot better. So
yeah.
Right. But then talking about the kids, so one of the things I see with parents, again, when they're confused about what to eat, their kids are going to be confused about what to eat. And so I really encourage those of you that are parents to avoid any fad diets, such as the clean eating program, the paleo diet, because kids are very perceptive, and they are going to latch on to that. And
Right.
a lot of some of the kids I work with, their eating disorders stem from some of those types of things. But one of the authors that I can recommend for those of you that have kids is Ellen Satter. And she wrote a book called Secrets of Feeding a Healthy Family. She's also got a lot of other books out there as well. But one of the tips that she uses in her book is called the division of responsibility in feeding.
Oh, yeah.
And so here it is, guys, and this will totally change your life if you're fighting with your kids about eating, because you really shouldn't be. But here it is. So the parents are in charge of the what, when, and where.
Okay.
So what the kids are going to eat, where they're going to eat, and the time. The kids are in charge of if they eat and how much.
I love it.
And so I think what you're going to find is that when you cross that division of responsibility, that's when the food fight happens. A child learns that, oh, well, maybe I don't know how to eat. Maybe I can't really trust myself. And there's a consequence. If a child chooses not to eat at a meal, they're going to be hungry. But as a parent, you can say, okay, well, snack is at 7:30. So here's what we're going to have for snack. So I guess you'll just have to wait.
Right.
That's what I did. That's how I raised my kids. But I also would make sure that I had something on the table that they would eat. Like, if you make a casserole, they're not going to eat. Make sure you have milk, bread, maybe some fruit, something like that. And don't stress about it. And try to make the kids enjoy mealtime. I usually put a no thank you helping on my kids' plate so that they didn't have to taste it, but they had to have it on their plate. And, kids are neophobic. They don't like to try new things. So they have to see something about 15 to 20 times before they'll try it. So even a goal can be just having the food on the plate. Family meals will become so much more fun.
Definitely, yeah. And the food fight that's definitely a thing. We struggle with that a little bit, not too bad. My wife has kind of set a rule that I'm not going to be a short order cook, right? So I'm not gonna make every person a different thing. So you either eat what we made or not. You don't have to eat it, but you don't get anything else. And so maybe that's something we could change, though, in giving them some things, though, that they could eat that we know that they're going to like.
Right, that you would normally put on the table, stuff like that.
But then to let them be hungry, I think is okay. Because they'll eventually come to eat, right? They have a couple nights of going to bed and not exactly full, and that's okay. And I don't think that makes you a bad parent. Back to the guilt thing. That doesn't make you a bad parent. Instead, it lets the kid know that, like, they don't necessarily, they can't manipulate that situation, I guess, right? Yeah. And so then they play within the rules a little bit better. And I think we all do that in life.
And kids like structure.
They do.
They want structure. They don't want, and I think it feeds into intuitive eating as well, that the kids really can learn to eat when they're hungry, stop when they're full.
Right.
There's no pressuring them to eat or not eat. So, again, if one of your kids was to eat something they normally hadn't eaten before, don't make a big deal of it. So just keep everything neutral.
Interesting.
Because kids can tell when they're being manipulated positively or negatively. They know.
Yeah.
So,
that's a good tip.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So that's a great question, actually, is what should we do for the working family, right? Where both mom and dad work. How do we address that? I think that's something that I run into all the time. I'm sure you do as well, where people say, how do I handle that? How do I handle my busy schedule as well as eating healthily? And planning, I think, is the biggest thing that we can do. If you have a plan where you take a day or sometimes multiple days or multiple times a week, where you plan out for the next few days or for the next week, what are my meals going to be? What do I need to shop for? Probably one of the most successful patients I've ever had, her pattern was go to the grocery store, buy the stuff that I need that she'd planned for, but then she diced it, cut it up, everything before she put it in the fridge.
Yeah.
And that way it was all ready to go.
Awesome.
Yeah, we all watch those cooking shows, and it's like, well, I could eat like that too if it was all diced up for me and I just had to add it. Look, it only took me 5 minutes to make that meal. It's because it was all diced up for you. But if we do that at the start of the week, then it's really not as bad. And so it does take some investment one day out of the week to plan, purchase, and prepare. But then you're kind of set up for the rest of the week.
Right. Yeah, it saves you money too.
It does. It saves you a ton of money if you've already got your plan in place, so that you're not at the grocery store saying, well, those chips look good and those crackers look pretty good and I love me some Oreos, right? If you've already got a plan in place of what am I going to buy, and now some of the grocery stores will even let you buy that online from home and pick it up. I mean, That's really
You don't
pretty
have to shop
simple.
when you're hungry,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's always tricky.
Yeah.
But so if that's already taken care of, if that's already worked out, makes the whole process so much simpler. And then those decisions are already made, so you can be proactive instead of reactive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
And that's a major issue I think most people deal with, like, because everybody's busy. And that's the nature of our kind of techie lifestyle. We fill our time up with stuff. And so I love it. Yeah.
Right. Nutrition needs to be a priority, not an afterthought.
Right. Yeah. No, all the time we have our patients, with this dilemma of, well, I looked in the pantry, there's nothing that I saw that jumped out at me, so I'll just grab Mickey D's, or I'll stop off at Maverick on my way in and grab whatever's there. And it's, can you find good choices there? Potentially. Is it horrible to do once a week or once every so often? Maybe not. But should that be our pattern? No, it's not a healthy pattern, right? Right. So anyway, I think those are some great tips for parents and for families. Any other key nuggets, key things that you'd like people to know?
Well, I think, again, just kind of notice your diet thoughts. Catch yourself thinking that. Should I have it or do I want it? Those types of things. And again, looking at your environment, making sure that some foods are out of sight so you don't have to think about it all the time. The less food decision sometimes is more helpful. Pre-packaging foods, slowing down and eating. I think those are some of the things you can start with. And
so by pre-packaging, you don't mean necessarily buying pre-packaged foods. No. It's more separating the amount you want to eat from the source of the food.
Something in a large container needs to probably like nuts or trail mix or stuff like that. Right?
Separating that out into, this is how much I want to eat versus how much I am compelled to eat.
You've got one less food decision. If you decide you're going to eat it, you don't have to decide how much because it's already done for you.
I love that.
Intuitive eater.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's a great choice. I do that for myself all the time. Like, I'll even split my food at a restaurant into half and put it in the doggy bag right at the start, so I'm not compelled to eat mine and then my wife's and then
nice. Yes, very good.
So that helps, but
yeah.
All right, perfect. So how should people get a hold of you then if they want to get a hold of you to ask more questions and things?
So I do have a website, Julie Hansen Nutrition.
Perfect.
And through there you can email me, read a little bit more about what services I offer.
Okay, awesome. So we will post that in the comments below, so you can go ahead and click on that. So Julie Hansen Nutrition.
Yes.
As well as any other online resources or things that you recommend?
Well, I think we're going to be developing a class for intuitive eating, so we will have that. But again, purchasing some of these books, I think would be
awesome.
Would be really good. So.
And they're all available on Amazon.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So that's the best way to get a hold of you then is through the website.
Yes.
Go ahead and get these books. Start looking through them so that you're already ready to go.
Right.
I think that'd be a good way to go. Thanks so much for joining us here at the Body Smart Vodcast. We're so excited to have wonderful people on like Julie, who is just an expert in her field and also just awesome to work with. So excited about that, and please post any comments you might have down below. Any questions for Julie or myself, I'm happy to answer them and get right back to you. Thanks again. We'll see you.
Thanks for listening to the Body Smart Podcast. Join us in the Body Smart community on Facebook to share your successes or ask a question for our next episode. Now get out there and take the next step toward living your active lifestyle.